Hi, my name is Mark McDonagh. Welcome to the National Security Decision Making Games Seminars track at Gen Con Online 2021. I'm here today to talk about nanotechnology, fact versus fiction, trying to separate the two. I've given a handful of these lectures about trying to separate some new technologies, fact versus fiction. This one I had to put a question mark because it's very difficult to figure out what's feasible and what isn't as far as nanotechnology goes. We'll go into what some of the implications are and where we're going, what the future might bring. My name is Who are we? We're a national security decision-making game. We're a nonprofit educational organization. We were founded in 1990, so we've been doing this for about 31 years now. We provide games and seminars on historical, military, and technology topics. We're devoted to understanding how world decisions are made. That includes trying to get a feel for other nations' political systems, other nations' body politics, and where they're trying to go, and how decisions are made in countries that are dissimilar to the United States and Western countries, the way that we view them. We're devoted to sharing things we learn along the way. We're build our nation cells and parts of our simulations, and we learn things about these nations, and we're determined to try to figure out and let people know what we've discovered and try to share the wisdom we've been able to build up. Over the 31 years, we've acquired a team of former military, government, academic, and business people, including IT, logistics, banking experience. We can simulate and take our game in a number of different directions. It's essentially our game is the world as you know it, and this is a good model, and go ahead and fix it. And see if you can do better than what the actual politicians and diplomats are doing. We appear at hobby conventions, we've appeared at academic venues, and at government installations. Some disclaimers regarding our presentations. All our presentations are based on public information. Most of us had a security clearance at some point in the past. We try to avoid anything that we know too much about. And there won't be any classified information discussed this, except by people who don't know. It's a matter of speculation, and then we try to pull clear of those discussions. Will you use excerpts and pictures that follow the fair use doctrine and Creative Commons rules? Any opinions, errors, or omissions on our own, none of our content should be considered representative of the opinions or policies of our past, present, or future employers. Most of us have worked at some point for the government. They don't know who we are. They don't know why we're here, and they don't care one way or another. So this is not a government presentation. Where NSDM can be found, watch for our Facebook page. In addition to putting out our schedule, you will find frequent postings of world events, geopolitics, military topics, and generally relatively good comment for those people who are interested in that kind of thing. We have been going to escape velocity in the Washington, D.C. area. Unfortunately, it was recently canceled for 2021, but watch for us in 2022. 2022, by all means, also watch for us at Dragon Con and at Gen Con, and hopefully we'll be there on site next time. Now, insofar as nanotechnology goes, nanotechnology is here. Applications from cleaning industrial solvents, from groundwater to wound dressings to stop bleeding and fight infection. Many consider nanotechnology to be the most promising of the cutting-edge research. Trying to figure out what nanotechnology would do for us and where it's going to go. At this point, is like similar to somebody in the middle of the 19th century wondering what's all this electricity and magnetism stuff going to do for us. I understand about the telegraph, but what else could it possibly do? Nanotechnology is interdisciplinary and is approaching making cutting-edge entries and technologies in almost every branch of engineering that's likely to continue in the future. Nanotechnology has also become fodder for science fiction authors and screenplay writers, from plausible to absurd stories. They build utopias on near magical nano-enhanced tools and robots and the negative end, the progression of deadly weapons and terrifying research and industrial accidents. So that's one of the things that motivated me to want to try to research nanotechnology, find out what's real, what isn't, what's possible, what isn't, and where the future is going to bring us. So what's this current potential, near-term projections, and the far-term potential? The current status, in a nutshell, it's in use, it's being developed further. If you've noticed your cell phone, your laptop, the memory is getting larger and larger, the battery is getting more and more powerful and longer lasting. Those are because of the incorporation of nanotechnology into those components. Near-term potential, more of the same, making things smaller, making things faster, making things operate better. The far-term potential is a little more difficult to try to get your hands around. But it appears that nanotechnology is likely to be incorporated into almost every aspect of modern engineering. There's a potential to change human civilization, as in a fourth revolution. The agricultural revolution made society the way we know it. Allowed for human civilization. The Industrial Revolution, of course, transformed us from a largely agrarian agricultural society living hand to mouth, so on the verge of starvation all the time, into the huge cities and our ability to spread across the planet and harvest energies at will. And of course, the information revolution that we're still in has been processing and allowing information flow across the planet, communication across the planet, and open a wide range of possibilities for human interaction that never existed before. The nanotechnology revolution has the potential to create a fourth revolution that will change things. And we'll discuss more toward the end of this what that revolution is in terms of nanotechnology for nanofabrication and creation. So at this point, it's hard to distinguish what the science is from the science fiction and the science fantasy. What is actually likely to happen, what's possible, and what's not possible. In popular fiction, just a few things. I would want to call out Michael Crichton's one of his last books, Prey, in which the bad guys were a swarm of nanotechnology, nanobots, nanorobots, which self-synchronized and created an artificial intelligence, could pull themselves together into a solid form that mimicked a person, and everyone thought they were talking to a person when they potential and the science behind it. Now, first, let's talk about what is nanotechnology. There have been many definitions of nanotechnology because since we've started tinkering with nanotechnology, we found more and more applications, and the definition has expanded to incorporate new things that we were finding. But most definitions circle around engineering using components on the order of 1 to 100 nanometers. Now, a nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter, 1/100000th of a millimeter. Smaller limit of 1 nanometer is bound by atomic radii. The hydrogen atom is about 1/3 of a nanometer. Now, as a physicist, I want to point out that you can't really consider an atom to be a sphere or a billiard ball with a solid radius like that. It's hard to quantify what, in fact, the actual size of a hydrogen atom is, and the attempt will be inaccurate in some way, because an atom is a bundle of energy wrapped in some type of a stable form. Actually, the nucleus is a bundle of energy and neutrons and protons in a stable configuration that's good for trillions of years. And the hydrogen atom itself is going to be a proton with an electron that's in some type of an energy cloud distributed around it. So we're a little bit naive if we say that a hydrogen atom is about 1/3 of a nanometer, but on a working scale, that's all right to start thinking in those terms. That when we're talking about nanotechnology being down to 1 nanometer, we're talking about something that is in fact 2, 3, 4 atoms in size. So the upper limit of 100 nanometers is where specific material properties begin to manifest that aren't seen in a macroscopic scale. These could have novel applications. So pure, raw cutting-edge nanotechnology starts to use materials that have different properties at the small scale and exploit those properties. Some lexicon. We start talking about some nanotechnology things. Just there are a few things to comment on. Top-down fabrication is making macro-sized, make something macro-sized and then carve it down to nanoscale. That's what we can do now. Bottom-up fabrication is to build a nano machine or some type of nanotechnology up molecule by molecule individually. This is still at the theoretical and/or experimental stage. We're not sure what the limitations are, how much of this is even feasible. That's one of the great controversies that we'll discuss toward the end of this lecture. Lexicon, we'll talk about a buckyball or a Buckminster Fuller. It's a carbon-60 molecule. And we'll go into more into what a buckyball is. Carbon nanotubes are small tubes of carbon atoms. They're very strong. They're bases for functionalization for a lot of nano applications. Functionalization means adding something to a nanotube or a part of a nanotube that will lend its properties. The nanotube then becomes a structure that you put things on to make the device you need to. Nanopores are designed in crevasses into a nanocomponent, a part of a nanotube. For example, delivery of drugs or the attachment of sensors to that nanotube. A quantum dot is a nanoparticle that reflects at a given color, allowing sensor applications. Different sizes of the quantum dot will reflect at different colors, allowing you to see from this color or that color what type of a nanoparticle is activated under what circumstances. And I want to mention gray goo. Gray goo is the apocalyptic scenario, popular among science fiction authors, in which some type of a nanobot disassemblers that can reproduce themselves in a von Neumann machine sort of way, scour the surface of the planet. They mutate, they get out of control, and they scour the Earth and turn everything into more copies of themselves and turn us all into gray goo. Okay, now we've been using nanotechnology for a long time. We just didn't understand it. There's researchers and report that a lead-based hair dye used in ancient Egypt made nanocrystals. They didn't understand what it was. And as early as the 10th century, many European church windows got their glass from gold nanoparticles. So a lot of those stained glass windows in the early Middle Ages had embedded nanoparticles. They understood that they carved these nanoparticles and down smaller and smaller, their color changes. They didn't know why, but they did. They embedded it in glass, and that's what did that. So why does gold change color? Well, on a macroscopic level, metals reflect light. Electrons in the electron cloud are only affected on the surface and don't resonate throughout the block. One brief lecture in solid-state physics and solid-state mechanics. A block of metal, when it condenses from a plasma or a liquid, will condense into some type of a crystalline structure. The valence electrons, the ones that aren't needed to fill up electron orbitals, are released throughout the metallic block, and they move through the metallic blocks easily as a cloud of electrons. That's why metals conduct electricity very well, because electrons move through them easily. It's why they conduct heat very well, because you touch something hot to the side of a cube of metal, it starts to heat the electrons that are free to move. And electrons under Brownian motion are very tiny. They're moving at a measurable fraction of the speed of light, and they're able to move through that metal very quickly and carry the heat through the metal. So different metals have different wavelengths that they reflect better, and that's what gives us the appearance of color. But on a nanoscale, things change. The electron cloud in a nanoparticle will resonate, because it's small enough now that what's happening on one side of that nanoparticle affects things on the other side of the nanoparticle, and you get a resonance with the way the electrons are moving through. That absorbs wavelengths of light. Different sizes of that nanoparticle absorb different wavelengths. For example, 90 nanometer gold nanoparticle absorbs red and yellow lights, so that allows the nanoparticle to appear blue-green, what actually gets reflected versus what gets absorbed. However, if you carve the gold down smaller into 30 nanometer particles, those absorb blues and greens, so the particle starts to appear red. This gives the gold or any other thing that exhibits the same characteristics some utility as a sensor or indicator. Embedding it into carbon nanotube filament or something else tiny will allow it to reflect light in different regions. We'll talk about some of those applications in a minute. Going back to the origins of nanotechnology theory, people usually cite a Richard Feynman lecture at Caltech in 1959, a lecture he titled "There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom," and that he argued that he didn't see anything in physics against being able to maneuver things atom by atom. And if you put atoms together, where the chemist says you make the substance, you can make anything going through atom by atom if you want to. Yeah, he was ahead of his time. The theory was there, but the technology wasn't. But it began a thought process of how of what we can do with and how we can exploit nano objects. K. Eric Drexler wrote a book called Engines of Creation in 1986. It was a popularized version of a paper he wrote in 1981 about potential bottom-up approach or building things molecule by molecule and nanoassemblers. And it sparked a lot of interest, and he coined the term nanotechnology in the book, and it got a lot of people thinking about things. Now, compared to the top-down approach, is all we've achieved to date, making macroscopic items and carving them up. If possible, we could do what the kind of things he suggests in terms of nanoassemblers. It will be a civilization changer, as I talked. There's controversy; it may not be possible. Now, in 1986, he had been working. In 1981, when he put out the paper, he'd been working with NASA for a while, few years on. It was just at that point had a master's degree working toward his doctorate. And he'd been working with NASA on solar sails and experimenting with fullerenes, or very small, very thin carbon, graphenes, graphene, which is a very small carbon filament, only a few atoms thick, a layer of carbon, as a potential for that. So he'd been doing a bit of work, practical work on very, very small nanoscale films of carbon. Let's talk about buckyballs. We fast forward to 1984. People start to make these buckyballs. Now, these are actually Buckminster Fullerenes, after Buckminster Fuller, the designer of the geodesic dome. It looks a little bit like it, geodesic dome, when you think about it. They're called fullerenes or buckyballs. It's actually a carbon-60 molecule, wraps around itself. Now, they were made in the lab in 1984, but it took the team of Kroto, Smalley, and Curl in 1985 to recognize their structure and figure out what they actually were. They got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for it in 1996. Richard Smalley will be particularly important in the development and discussion of nanotechnology. We'll get toward his contributions later in this lecture. A buckyball looks like a soccer ball with 20 hexagons and 12 pentagons. There are few practical applications found yet, but got people thinking about the way things could be put together like this. Now, carbon nanotubes were found in 1991. It's like a buckyball, but it's made in a tube rather than a spherical configuration, made of hexagons and pentagons, but in linear shape, and you could put them in different configurations, ranging anywhere from 1 nanometer to 100 nanometers. There are various sizes, meaning various radii, but we could put different additives to the structure, become a key building block for nano objects, which is called functionalization. We could add things to change their color, change their reflectivity, change their conductivity. They are naturally strong. They're the highest strength to weight ratio of any known material. Braided into microscopic scales, they're stronger than steel. That might make a fundamental change in our engineering practices. If we could start replacing our steel with the entire background research, development, extraction process, from mining through refinement and through forging, with carbon nanotubes that could be manipulated very easily. And carbon is one of the most abundant materials on the planet. Now, let's talk about the use of nano components as reactants and catalysts. This gets down to the surface to volume ratio. If you have a material, a 1 centimeter square cube, the ratio of surface to volume is 6 to 1. It's 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, so that's 1 cubic centimeter. Each side is 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, so it's 1 square centimeter. There are 6 sides. Anybody here ever roll dice? 6 sides. So it's 6 square centimeter surface area to 1 cubic centimeter volume. So it's 6 to 1. Now, if we take that cube and we split it 10 times vertically, 10 times lengthwise, and 10 times widthwise, we've made 1,000 mini cubes, 1 millimeter square cubes. But the total ratio now, ratio of surface to volume changes now to 60 to 1. So we've increased the surface to volume ratio by a factor of 10. The same quantity of material, but it's 10 times as reactive, because reactivity Chemical reactivity is generally based on how much of the surface area is exposed to the reactant that it's dealing with. This is the same phenomena as if you want to use crushed ice versus ice cubes in your drink. The crushed ice will melt faster, will weaken your drink faster than the ice cubes will. Now, if the 10 centimeter cube is instead cut into 1 centimeter cube is instead cut into 10 nanometer cubes, you'll have the same volume material, but it's got 10 million times more reactive, 10 million times surface to volume ratio. This is useful in chemical and biological applications. They speed reactions as a reactant in a chemical process or as a catalyst, which is also very important to applications. We make the thing once and then use it over and over again. A catalyst is a material that expands or accelerates a chemical reaction or enables a chemical reaction without being consumed by it. So where are we today? In some applications, it's a mature technology. Just a few of many uses today. Integrated circuits, features that can be measured in nanometers, allowing computer chips that contain billions of transistors. The typical size of a transistor today on whatever RAM or coding it is, we're pushing down lower than about 18 to 15 nanometers. Now, on a silicon chip, that transistor is about 15, holding a bit. That transistor holds 1 bit of information. It's about 15 nanometers, and it looks like this gob of material that's from top-down manufacturing. From bottom-up manufacturing, we can get them smaller. It's more organized. You have an actual tiny little cube, 5 nanometers in size, and that's sitting on your silicon wafer, and that will allow perhaps the next generation of data storage technology. We've been making lightweight components from tennis rackets to windmill blades, carbon nanotubes and fibers, enhancing that. Cleaning up industrial solvents and contaminated groundwater, clothing with nanoparticles that shed water or stains, catalysts for chemical manufacturing, make it more efficient. We save energy and keep waste products to a minimum that way. Coating on countertops kills bacteria. A sunscreen to provide UV rays without producing a thick white residue. Wound dressing to rapidly stop bleeding in trauma patients, and bandages that kill germs automatically. Those are just a few of many, many applications. More uses as a film on glass to stop water from beading and dirt from accumulating, paints to prevent corrosion and the growth of mold, coatings in heavy-duty machinery such as ships and oil industry, food packaging to keep the oxygen out away from the food to slow food spoils. Notice these are very mundane, common, everyday applications on your countertops, whatever. Nanotechnology is not something science fiction-y. It's here and it's in use today. So what are some things under development? Let's talk about some of the medical applications under development. Targeted drug delivery, like delivering chemotherapy drugs directly to the cancer tumors. Better imaging for diseases such as NMRI, attaching nanoparticles to disease cells, which increases the image signal. Sensors for medical diagnosis, early detection of the disease in a patient, or detection of bacteria such as salmonella in foods. The capability to regrow cartilage in joints to relieve arthritis pain. Nanofiber materials that can replace or repair blood vessels and help patients with vascular or heart disease. Burn dressings that release antibiotics when a burn becomes infected, to enable more rapid recovery. Administration of drugs orally that were historically given in shots, such as insulin. Let's explore some of these in greater detail. Currently being developed, nanotechnology to deliver drugs, heat, or light to a specific wound or infection. Deliver to specific cytocells such as cancer cells. Particles are engineered to be attracted to disease cells. Usually this happens by taking a particle, possibly a fragment of a nanotube, attaching antibodies to that nanotube, so that nanotube will look for the specific cancer cell or proteins being created by the disease bacterium or the virus. These techniques reduce the damage to the healthy cells of the body, since you're not putting, essentially, let's face it, chemotherapy is basically poisoning the patient with a poison that attacks the cancer cells, but worse than the patient, and hope the patient survives and the cancer cell doesn't. This way we can deliver the medicine directly to the cancer cells or any other disease, rather than infecting the whole patient with the drugs. Now, some of these techniques also adding light or whatever thing to it will allow us for early detection. Earlier detection of cancer would be extreme. It would be invaluable in trying to start treatment. Diagnostic techniques. Researchers using antibodies attached to carbon nanotubes in chips to detect cancer cells in the blood. We could develop this. We could develop a simple lab test providing early detection of cancer cells in the bloodstream. Researchers building antibodies into nanowires. The idea of nanowire is a carbon nanotube that we've added components to make it conductive, so it serves as a wire. An array of such wires use different. We attach different antibodies to the different wires and place that in the blood sample, that array in a sample of blood we've taken from the patient. And whichever wire, we have a computer that samples which wires change conductivity, that identifies what antibodies have had the cancer cells or the proteins from the disease attached to it, and that allows quick identification of what has actually been ailing the patient. Diagnosis in a couple of minutes in a doctor's office. When previously we'd need to collect a blood sample that we've sent out to a lab for a cultural analysis, might take 2 weeks depending on the lab's backload. More diagnostics. Quantum dots. I mentioned quantum dots are nano objects that emit light at different wavelengths or different colors, as you would. Attaching different antibodies to quantum dots that will emit at different colors and place that in the blood sample. The odd antibodies that will attach to a disease protein or a virus, causing those dots to form clusters. We then shine a UV light, and the color of the glow that comes off reveals what the disease is, which antibodies actually got activated, telling you what you've got there. Developing a test for early stages of kidney damage. The gold nanorods are functionalized to attach to the type of protein generated by damaged kidneys. The nanorod changes color when proteins accumulate on the nanorod. That can be detected quickly and inexpensively. Early detection of a kidney damage problem. In wound treatment, research has developed a bandage that applies electrical pulses to the wound using electricity produced by nanogenerators worn by the patient. That's probably some type of a thermistor or a heat-generated energy. It's been shown that low-level DC currents enhance chronic wound healing rate and the closure of the wounds. The nano bandages also provide antibacterial wound treatment. Researchers are developing a polymer nanoparticles that act as synthetic platelets. Platelets, of course, allow your blood to help clot. Now, if you have a cut, you expect that the blood will clot. If the cut's on your surface, you might have to go see a doctor and get a bandage or even stitches in. Internally, that's a problem. Internal bleeding is dangerous after an accident, and anything that can enhance blood clotting helps. So these are particularly good for the treatment of internal bleeding. In electronics, just a few applications. An LED with zinc oxide nanostructures called fins makes your LED, your light output higher with a smaller power output, smaller energy required. Atomically thin iridium tin oxide sheets to improve touch screens that make them cost less and consume less power. Low power methods to use nanomagnets as switches in electrical circuits might lead to the next generation of power consumption in transistor-based circuitry. Researchers developed a method to print prototype circuit boards using standard inkjet printers. Imagine that you're an electrical engineer, you've designed a circuit board as a prototype. You want to make a prototype, you can now put a special ink in your inkjet printer and send a piece of paper through, and it will print the circuit usably on that piece of paper. So you have a very quick ability to make a prototype of your design. Energy savings applications are under development. Longer range electric cars and electric batteries, improving capacity up to a factor of 5. If we are able to improve our electric cars, make them more more efficient, more cost effective, improve our hybrids, that will allow the reduction of fossil fuel usage and the expenditure of carbon emissions. Lower cost solar cells using nanomaterials. They reduce the cost of the solar cell manufacturing and the materials and installation costs, again, allowing us to try to divorce our technology away from fossil fuels. Stronger lightweight materials in spacecraft and aircraft, making more efficient fuel consumption. That allow the spacecraft to carry more payload the structure of the ship itself. Researchers using carbon nanotube films to stop the growth of dendrites and lithium metal anodes that will allow us to develop lithium metal batteries, much higher capacity and faster charging than lithium ion batteries. Researchers are working on a catalyst consisting of thin sheets of metal carbide as an alternative to platinum, very expensive, the generation of hydrogen from water. Environmental applications clean up our water supplies, reducing the cost of producing drinking water from salt water, desalination. A filter made from thin nanosheets of aluminum oxide can filter both heavy metals and oils out of water, removing bacteria from polluted water. Photocatalytic copper tungsten oxide nanoparticles break down oil into biodegradable components. Now we have an oil spill, we have this nanotechnology, we can spread on the oil spill, allowing it to break down into something that nature will then biodegrade. It's being used in applications under development to clean up air by removing pollutants, removing volatile organic compounds found in indoor air, and power plants themselves that are emitting carbon dioxide, nanomaterial components used in the exhaust stacks absorb the carbon dioxide, and we can sequester that in some benign form. Now, let's get into the futuristic things or pie in the sky application. Nanotechnology has been used frequently in discussions of the space elevator. The common science fiction discussion or even speculation on science features involve an elevator that will carry someone to geosynchronous orbit. That's 25,000 miles up. Now, carbon nanotubes have been identified by engineering as the only known material strong enough to make this happen. My take on I always have a problem, roll my eyes whenever somebody starts talking about a space elevator to geosynchronous orbit. That orbital debris is going to be a problem with the space elevator. It's going to be continuously bombarded by orbital debris. It's going to be continuously bombarded by satellites, and it'll be a massive effort to try to deconflict where you're going to build this thing and everything that's in orbit. So that's where we are as far as that goes. But for what it's worth, if anyone's going to build a space elevator, what I see potentially happening in the next few generations is trying to build an elevator to about 100 or 150,000 feet. And that's feasible and will relieve a lot of your costs in terms of launching a rocket from there into with getting out of the atmosphere. So that I think is a potential goal for the next generation or two. Repairing cells, full overcorrection of any disease, any injury or disease, turning back aging. Most of these suggest the use of some type of a nanobot, self-synchronizing, an artificial intelligence network, or slave to an external computer control, because these things have to be relatively smart and know exactly what they're doing. They're not going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. And molecular fabrication might be not pie in the sky, and that deserves a few slides of its own, which we'll be discussing at the end here. Okay. Let's talk about cell repair, chromosome replacement therapy, or CRT. This is still hypothetical, but it's an exciting potential application. The theory is to use mechanical nanorobots infused into the human body. They go to a cell, they enter the cell nucleus, they remove an existing set of chromosomes, replace a new set of chromosomes, and then exit the body. So potentially take out your bad DNA, the DNA that's been damaged, and put it in with fresh DNA, your own DNA that's yours, and it might be the ideal gene delivery vector. It could provide a complete and permanent cure for most all genetic diseases. A set of artificially manufactured chromosomes that are defect-free copies of the original. They can use anti-aging. What is aging? Aging is the generalized destruction of our DNA by the environment we've been living in, radiation we've been receiving. So this could turn back the clock. Now, into the science fiction, there are a lot of applications here for super soldiers or mutations or turning somebody into a monster. So this is an interesting field, both in terms of the science and the science fiction. Now, molecular fabrication. Here on the upper right, we have an illustration of nanoscale mechanical gears. Each of these balls is an atom, so it tells you how small this thing is supposed to be. But it's a gearing mechanism. This is straight off Wikipedia. I grabbed this. Now, you remember K. Eric Drexler, author of Engines of Creation, kicking off a lot of the nanotech discussion. His premise is that to try to get to some type of a production on a molecular scale, which he called atomic precision manufacturing. Now, he argues, and this is accurate, if it can work, his numbers are accurate, that if you scale a machine down, they still work. He acknowledges that some complications with Brownian motion, meaning thermal motion, meaning Brownian motion. But it's speed scale as well. Shrinking a machine by 100 million will increase its speed by 100 million. The nano gears we're showing here on the upper right, if they're turning and they're part of a nanoscale machine, they're being bombarded by electrons running through the system under Brownian motion. It's kind of like pelting them with supersonic tennis balls. They have to be engineered to take that and understand it has to be built in to the system to recognize that thermal motion is going to be something that they're going to have to work their way around. Now, in theory, when you scale the machine down, you take that 1 by 1 by 1 centimeter cube. If you scale, if that's a machine, if you scale it down into by a scale of 100 million copies of itself, you increase the output of that machine by a factor of 100 million. In theory, a machine nanoscale will process its mass and material in 1 second. The idea being it's taking some atoms or some small molecules and putting them together in whatever way you want into a larger molecule. Follow-on stages turn the larger molecules into even larger and larger and larger molecules. So through multiple stages, you have these tiny machines making the small molecules, the larger machines making the output devices, and it moves very, very quickly. Now, in radical abundance, you remember he wrote Engines of Creation in 1986. Radical abundance is, he describes it as an example, a factory the size of a small car wash that can make a car in a matter of minutes, using most abundant materials on the planet: carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, plus some traces of others, cheap, fast, with minimum carbon footprint, low pollution, low energy usage. What he describes is this end of the car wash has the platform on which the car is being assembled. Circling that are a bunch of robot arms that we'd expect to see in any manufacturing plant today, taking smaller components and assembling it into the car. On this side, however, are a handful of chambers, 1/10 the size, and the walls 1/10 the size of the main chamber, in which is a microscopic copy of the same thing, a 1/10 scale copy, with small arms inside those, taking smaller components and assembling the component that the larger arm is going to grab, put together in this car. At the back of those chambers are 1/10 scale, the miniature chambers beyond that, all the way down to the nanoscale, where we have these machines that are turning out their mass and material every second. And if he can make that work, he can in fact make a car in a couple of minutes, and it'll be very, very cheap. Now, the first time I started to hear about his vision of assembling things atom by atom, the physicist in me said that that's got to violate the uncertainty principle in some way. But then I was reminded down here, we have on the lower left, we have the IBM symbol that was rendered in 1989 as an IBM researcher, and of course the fact that it was part of advertisement too. But these are in fact individual xenon atoms, shown by a scanning electron microscope, and they were positioned on a chilled crystal of nickel. And they printed out. I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but it's the initials IBM, and made it out of a handful of xenon atoms. So we've already demonstrated and shown the ability to manipulate atoms on an atom by atom level and position them precisely where we want to under these specific circumstances. Xenon on a chilled crystal of nickel. The whole logo is 3 nanometers long, so it's feasible. And in terms of his ability to that Drexler's ability to claim that we can assemble small molecules into larger molecules Nature does that all the time. Nature builds proteins, ribosoids. Nature builds large life forms like ourselves and elephants out of the tiniest materials. So if nature could do it, why can't we? And can we do it in a more organized manner? So In terms of his vision, almost anything in a household that a household might want to be made in seconds at essentially no cost. The overall vision is something similar to a Star Trek replicator. It may not be possible, but it's not science fiction. It's potentially feasible, and if it is in fact feasible, it's probably not. It might not be that far away. We could see that something like that in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Now, I don't think anybody's going to open up door number 3 and show us a Star Trek replicator anytime soon. But if this is done, we're probably going to be making some things that are rather simple and try to figure out how we can make things more and more complex out of it. If this happens, mining industries are largely going to become unnecessary. The entire supply chain from the mines through the foundries is going to go away if carbon nanotubes start to replace steel in our components. They're very cheap solar energy and very efficient engines can come out of this. Now, Drexler's vision is a game changer for the human condition. If it's realized, it will be a revolution on the scale of the agricultural, industrial, and information revolutions. Make available the availability of things as common as the computer's internet made the availability of information. Again, everything's got to be simple and quick and cheap. There's no reason we can't put some type of this nano assembler into every household on the planet. The poorest people now can make anything they want, almost anything they want, for pennies in a matter of minutes everywhere. I think that's not going to change everything socially. So he sees this as an alternative path to what many are seeing as a collision between economic development and global resource scarcity, and a future where now it's beginning to appear to some that progress and growth are zero-sum games. Our population explosion, our buildup of waste materials, our impact on the environment, and what the actual resources of the planet are, including non-renewables. Now, remember Richard Smalley, who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1996 for identifying the structure of buckyballs. He objects to the very concept of what Drexler is proposing as being infeasible. He outlined his objections in an article in Scientific American, Chemistry, Love, and Nanobots. He said that putting molecules together is not a mechanical process. It's more like love. It's more complicated than that. A boy and a girl together mechanically and expect them to fall in love. Anyway, he identified two problems: the fat phase problem. The manipulators you're using to put these molecules together are themselves made of atoms, and they won't be able to manipulate things as precisely as Drexler's vision requires them to. And the sticky fingers problem, they're made of atoms. Those atoms will interact with the molecules that you're moving them with, that you're trying to move. He said self-replicating mechanical nanobots are simply not possible in our world. Now, he's got credentials, and so does Drexler. So this began to boil over. Drexler wrote an open letter to Smalley in 2003, quote, "to correct your public misrepresentation of my work," unquote. This led to a series of open letters, which essentially a public debate. The summary, Drexler said, "I never proposed using fingers, they're not required." He wrote a book in 1991 called Nanotechnology, I believe, where he outlined some of the techniques used. They're not required, instead using something like enzymes and ribosomes, which are, of course, what nature uses to put molecules together. Smalley agreed with that, but where the enzymes come from, any enzyme technology we know of uses a water medium, and using a water medium and enzymes will eliminate the use of silicon, steel, copper, aluminum, titanium, virtually any of the materials upon which modern technology is built. You can't make a computer, you can't make a radio using these various things. You can't, an enzyme can't manipulate those atoms. So how's this self-replicating nanobot ever going to make any of these components? He said, Drexler, do you really believe it's possible to do enzyme-like chemistry of arbitrary complexity and with only dry surfaces and in a vacuum? Please tell us about this new chemistry. Went on from there. Drexler, in his response, fell back on Feynman's plenty of room at the bottom, saying that Feynman's vision was inspired by biology, but it's essentially mechanical. That Feynman believed that this is possibly done, and evoking Feynman is usually usually a good technique in an engineering debate. He said the technical objection Smalley was raising reached beyond chemistry and systems engineering. Basically, he's saying that if it's hard to make this component, we'll decide to make this component of these materials, or these subcomponents, we'll make these components instead. It's a system engineering aspect to figure out how we're going to assemble these things in a way that has low fault, high reject tolerance, low faults, and he believes that it's possible to make the failure rate about 1 in a trillion with proper systems engineering and trying to make this thing possible. Nanosystems is Drexler's 1992 book. Okay, he outlined these, and he points out that Nanosystems was at this point out for a year and has withstood a decade of scientific scrutiny. Smalley responded that you can't make precise chemistry occur as desired between two molecules. You need to guide them down a particular reaction coordinate, and this will lead you through many-dimensional hyperspace. Basically, when you put when you maneuver one atom in a molecule, it maneuvers all the others. You need to control a bunch of atoms at the same time. And if you just jam two molecules together, they're not likely to make they'll react, but they're not likely to make the react in the way that you want. So yeah, he's never seen a convincing argument that the list of conditions and synthetic targets that Drexler will be able to build is anything but a very, very short list. My take, I want to recognize that Drexler's vision can change the human condition, and it is possible. We haven't seen yet that it has been demonstrated. Smalley's objections are well founded, and they may be accurate. It may not be possible. It may not be feasible to manipulate things on the scale that Drexler wants. Nature builds these things, but nature uses enzymes. Nature uses thermal or Brownian motion. Nature uses a water-based medium. Drexler, from the other point of view, Drexler says that, well, engineering, we built airplanes that vastly outperform birds. We built factories that have vastly outperform anything nature's done. So when we get the technology right, we can outperform nature. And that's not unfeasible. Each of these individuals is about 4 tiers above me in terms of his qualification to discuss the issue, so I have a hard time weighing in. I feel a little bit like Tevye and Fiddler on the Roof, listening to this argument, saying, "You're right." Oh, you're right. They can't both be right. You're right too. So, as in terms of nanotechnology, nanofabrication, it will, if it can be realized, it will change the world in ways we can't possibly imagine at this point. All through human civilization, it's been a matter of who had this and who had that, and who fought over this, and how much of that there was. And in the vision that Smalley has, that's all going away. There's going to be little reason for people to compete over resources anymore, over objects, this, that, or the other thing, because everybody can have anything they want, cheap and free and easy. And it's going to solve a lot of our problems in terms of renewable resources, climate change, and other things of that nature. Countries that are involved in nanotechnology research, US, China, Germany, Japan, South Korea, all have major funding initiatives. There have been especially international cooperation between the United States and China, and considering we're likely to be competitors and moving into the century in terms of who's going to be dominating the world. It's exciting to see that we're actually working together. We'll work together in individual areas, although although there's expect and come to our games, we'll see in the national security decision-making game in the future, there's likely to be some type of a intersection of U.S. and Chinese interests in the next generation. So, thank you for coming. Well, I'll have questions in a moment, but right now I wanted to put in a plug. We will be having our online contemporary mega game starting at 8 p.m. Running to midnight or thereabouts. This game will focus. Tonight's game will focus on Israel in the post-Netanyahu era as they try to navigate their way into the future. Tomorrow we'll be presenting a lecture in this time slot on the United Nations 75th birthday, Reflections, Repute. Tomorrow night at 8 p.m. will be another contemporary mega game. This will be focusing on Iran and the aftermath of their summer elections, and how Iran's going to be moving into the future. On Saturday, we'll have a panel on cyber war from 6 to 8 p.m., followed by our Cuban Missile Crisis simulation from 8 p.m. to midnight. We've done that at this point about 5 times, and it's been very online. It's been very exciting. Please check with us on Facebook. We hope to see you at Origins in 2 weeks, and hopefully see you back here on site at Gen Con next year. So that's my presentation on nanotechnology. Now I'll take and field whatever questions I can. Okay. Do geoengineering? I'm not familiar with the word geoengineering. I'm sorry. Okay, if he could post an explanation of that, and we'll go to the next question while I try to get that back. What else we got, Merle? No more questions. Okay. Geoengineering, that sounds to me like I'm sorry. Geoengineering is a deliberate and large-scale manipulation of an environmental process that affects the Earth's climate in an attempt to counteract the effects of global warming. Okay. Yeah. Well, there are a lot of appearances, and there are a lot of different avenues being pursued in terms of using nanotechnology to try to apply it to the effect to global warming and climate change. I mentioned various filters and screens using nanomaterials to strip carbon dioxide from exhaust of power plants, so they can be the technical term is sequestering carbon dioxide, putting in some type of a form where it won't go into the atmosphere, and that's one thing. Various materials we're researching, putting them into the stratosphere to start trying to absorb carbon dioxide and having it possibly rain down in some type of a form where it won't affect won't change the Earth's albedo and affect climate change. Nanotechnology is being used to change or improve on the energy usage, making machines that use less energy, requiring, of course, less energy to be produced, and allowing us to use less fossil fuels and put less carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. It's also being used to improve our ability to generate power, better solar cells that can take more of the strain away from, more of the burden away from fossil fuels and non-renewable energy sources. And we're eliminating contaminants from our groundwater, eliminating contaminants from our atmosphere. These are things that nanotechnology has the potential to do. We'll see what can be realized and what can't. Yeah, could some government entity or private entity make a corporation scatter nanoparticles to try to reverse global warming? The potential is there. I'm kind of scared to try to start tinkering at the atmosphere on that level. What's the recent movie? The railroad train in the far future, in which the planet has been entirely encased in an ice age, where they overdid it. They said, okay, we control global warming this way. Like control global warming, they plunged the whole planet into an ice age. So we better figure out what exactly we're doing, what the implications are before we try doing anything like that. If we want to release nano scale particles on that level, we're going to need to try to find some type of material for them to start